Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred. And today I'm excited to share with you another little mini training on the common concerns of protective parts and how to meet them. Today we're going to do the first 5. There are actually 10, so this will be a 2-part video. But when we go toward a protective part that's been often doing a job for us to keep us safe for many, many years, they can't just step back automatically. They need their fears, their concerns to be listened to, validated, and met. The self will never steamroll over them. It will never force its way or its agenda. Self does not have an agenda. It will go toward whatever blocks the way with curiosity, with compassion, listen to their concerns and meet their concerns until they feel safe and comfortable enough to, of their own choice, relax back and allow more room for self. So let me share my screen with you. So yes, whatever blocks the way is the way. And the self knows that. It just meets whatever's presently in front of it, whatever is resisting, whatever part might be maybe dissociating, distracting, might be skeptical, angry, anything in front of it, it will just want to get to know, connect with. So I first got this list from a training by Fran Booth, who is a lead IFS trainer. I believe it might actually come from IFS Institute. So you'll see this commonality as we go through, that the way forward is to validate and meet the concerns. Definitely not bypass them, because there will be backlash if we do. All right, so the number one, by far the number one concern that protectors have is that if they relax back, the system will be overwhelmed and get stuck in the pain of the exiles, because protective parts are keeping the exiles locked up, down, out of consciousness, so that we can function in everyday life. And if they stop, they're afraid that those exiles will come, burst into the surface, and take over and overwhelm us. And they're right. The reason they fear this is because it has happened before. Whether it was a part that had panic attack type response, or collapse, or just utter despair, or beliefs of unworthiness, unlovability, that are just so incredibly painful, deeply painful shame that just takes over and debilitates the person. So their fear is very real. We want to validate it. They fear the person will be pulled into a black hole from which there's no return, that the exiles will take over and overwhelm the system. So again, we want to validate that. Sometimes we can update them. I'll say that before I go into the list on the right. It can be really helpful to update them, to ask, who do you see when you look at me? Or how old do you think I am? Because if they see you as a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, of course you can't handle that much pain, that much panic, right? But if they understand that you are the adult self that you are now, that might help. But also we can let them know, the first one on the right here, that there are ways we can help the part, meaning the exile or whatever part they're afraid of overwhelming the system, not take over, to titrate the intensity of their emotions. And if you watch one of my past videos on using that dial, right, we can give a dial to an exile and say, can you practice turning it up and down? How much emotion, how much, you flood the system, and just see if you can turn it up just a little bit, and the self will come to your aid, to listen to you, to help you, to get you what you need. And as they begin to learn that they are able to do that, and that they won't be turned off and suppressed by other parts, that the self will come to them, they will do that. So there really is this negotiation with the exile and with the protective part that's afraid of them taking over. The second one is that parts take over because they desperately want to be seen. So once this exile knows they're being lovingly witnessed, they may naturally relax. So can we try that and see? So basically, I'm offering this to the protective part to say, I know that you haven't had the capacity to really be with and love and listen to this exile, but I do. I have that capacity, and they just want to be seen and heard and listened to. And so if I can go to them, and you can propose just a short experiment. What if you let me go for 2 minutes? Or you can go back and forth. They might say, no, that's too much. Okay, what if I go for 30 seconds? Whatever they'll allow you to do, experimenting, offering experiments is really helpful because they need to gain evidence that the self is actually capable of being with those exiles. Again, you're getting their permission to go to them. The last one says, if something really feels like too much, you can come back in and stop the action. A phrase that Dick likes to use with these protectors is, you are the boss, right? They need to know that we are not ever trying to strong arm them, get them to do anything they're uncomfortable with. There's respect for them. And the fact that they have protected the system, they've protected these vulnerable parts. And so if at any point they come in and say, no, it's too much, we respect it. We say, okay, we will stop now. We'll come out, right? There really is this partnership. The self and these big protectors become allies that respect one another. It's not like the self just takes over. Once they trust the self, that's when the self can say, you might see Dick Schwartz a lot. It's say, can you ask that part of it can just give you space or step back? When it does it that quickly, it's usually because it trusts the self already. It has some kind of relationship with the self. But initially, it may not be able to do that. And so that groundwork, if you will, I don't know, at the beginning of getting to know these protectors and meeting these common fears is so, so valuable in being able to, these big protective parts to trust the self enough to do the deeper work and to do the healing work. It's not worthless at all to meet their concerns. It actually makes the work going forward much smoother. All right, so number 2 is the fear that nothing can help. This is a real kind of helplessness, hopelessness. They don't see any possible benefit from going into the pain. Exiles cannot change. The damage has been done. There's just no point. That was then. This is now. Don't look back, right? They might say, I've tried all kinds of things in the past and nothing has worked. So it feels threatening to hope, right? To say, I'm going to try this thing again, get our hopes up. They're just going to be dashed again and feel, then that's going to activate really desperate, despairing parts. So again, the self validates this and says, I know you've tried many ways to deal with this already, and that you were disappointed and it was really painful. Yet this is a different way. It's where there's this resource inside, and I am that resource, and I'm talking to you right now, and I can go and help the target part, whether it's another protector it's pointing at, or an exile that's feeling volatile, and I can be with it, and I have the capacity to help it heal. So there is a bit of the self being a hope merchant here, right? And if you're working with a client, the practitioner's self can be very confident about this. I know, when I offer this to client systems, it's because I've seen it in myself and in countless clients, right? So I can say with very strong confidence, genuine confidence, the self is capable of healing these parts. But again, if they haven't experienced this, they cannot trust it right away. So the second one says, it's understandable that you are skeptical. Would you be willing to let us try this other way to see if it's effective? Again, offering an experiment. If it's not effective, you can go back to saying, no, this isn't working. Don't want to do it. You're the boss, right? Okay. Number 3 is the fear that other parts will escalate. Usually, some of these big firefighters, like suicidal or self-harming parts, raging addiction parts, or maybe really harsh inner critics that are really genuinely threatening to the person's inner well-being, mental health, and their life, their physical health. So doing internal work with painful parts could set off extreme firefighters that could further jeopardize the person. So this concern is very valid. You want to validate this concern. You are absolutely right. If we go to the vulnerable parts without permission from you or from suicidal, self-harming, critical, raging, addictive parts, they will backlash. They will get bigger. They will freak out about it. And we don't want that to happen. You're absolutely right. We don't want that to happen. Thank you. Thank you for pointing me to these other parts that are so big. And, so now I can go to them because now they are whatever blocks the way is the way, right? So it's really valuable information. So you might say, we can work next with the firefighter. The suicidal part is actually a really good one to work with first. Really big inner critics are really helpful to work with first, because if we don't get their permission, they are going to get bigger and backlash. And we can do it safely. We can help the others not take over. The same self that's talking to you part, that is not going to steamroll over you and is going to meet your concerns. I'm not going to steamroll over them to get to the exile, setting them off. Can I show you, right? Can I do just a little bit? Again, making an experiment. And we won't go any further until you agree that it's safe to do so. But if you could give us a chance to get to know that part, meaning whatever part it's afraid of coming in, for just a moment, we can help it not take over. So really, parts that block the way and they have concerns are often pointing at other parts. If I stand down, that part's going to come in. So then we can say, thank you. Thank you for pointing to that part. Can I go and help that part? Would it help you if that part were helped and it wasn't so extreme? And often they say, yes, yes, please go help them. Okay, number 4. Number 4 is the fear of the practitioners or the groups, depending on if you're, whoever is a spectator of your work, right? Their reaction, judgment, disgust, abandonment, hopelessness, overwhelm. The protector fears that the therapist or group will not be able to handle the exiles or other intense feared parts. The protector is afraid that the facilitator will be repulsed or overwhelmed, reject, abandon, or betray the client. Again, this is a valid concern. In my own work, in my system, myself, it's interesting, myself doesn't ever say, no, they won't hurt you. They won't ever judge you or criticize you, because the self knows that it has no control at all over other people. It says, if or when that happens, I will be here for you. And we can create distance, we can leave, we can do whatever we need to do. Call on protectors to protect us in that case. So some good responses from the self are, I or we, if we're in a group, do have parts. So if you see any reaction in me or in someone else that impacts any of your parts, please let me know. Any reaction in me is about my parts and not about you. And sometimes I'll say, I'm going to call on one of my vigilant parts to be looking for the parts that are coming up in me so that I can turn toward them and help them relax if that happens. But it's true. Everyone is human. Everyone has parts that can get activated at, in a split second by something that someone says or does. And then that can be read, on our face as judgment or contempt or criticism or something like that. And so as a practitioner, that's why our number one job is actually to be a parts detector of our own parts so that we can keep showing up in self. And if our parts come in, to turn toward them, have them relax, or, just speak for the parts to the client. Oh, I'm noticing a part coming up in me. I'm going to tend to it right now. Another response might be, I will do my best to be aware of and tend to any parts that get activated in me so that myself can show up. Yeah, just taking responsibility for our own system. Again, we can't guarantee that if there's a group for every person in the group, but sometimes you might say, can you look at the faces of the people and just see how you feel about how they're responding to you right now? And again, if any part comes up at any time, it doesn't have to share, right? What's really important is that whatever the parts are saying is heard by the person's self. And so if there's information that it thinks is shameful or will be judged, it doesn't have to share that out loud with the practitioner or a group. There's always confidentiality inside. All right, so number 5 is the fear, this is a common one too, is the fear of losing their job or becoming obsolete. They'll often express like, I'm afraid I would disappear, I would go away, like what, you're trying to get rid of me, right? Which is often what other polarized parts are trying to do to them, is to get rid of them. So again, their fear makes sense. They fear they will lose their job, they'll be eliminated, or they'll lose power. And they want to maintain that power because if they don't have it, the exiles or other, big parts will take over and overwhelm the system. They often feel like, I have to do this. You don't understand. If I don't do this, you're going to be in a world of suffering, right? So they have really good intention and are doing a really loyal, sometimes thankless job. And so we really want to recognize that and let them know. So the responses are, we're not trying to get rid of you. Never trying to get rid of any part. It's impossible, first of all. And there will absolutely be times when you are necessary, when you are needed in the system. So never trying to get rid of you. Really reassure them of that. And then we kind of offered them hypotheticals, like, what if you could do the same job you're doing, but more effortlessly, or just part of the time, more moderately, right? Would that feel better? Often they'll say, well, yeah, it would, but I can't, right? You don't understand. I can't do that. So then again, we're kind of being the hope merchant and offering, if it were possible for me or for the client self, right, to go to what you protect so that they weren't so vulnerable anymore. They weren't stuck in this time of trauma and suffering. They weren't full of shame and despair and panic. If that weren't there, then could you do something else? And if you could do something else, what would you want to do? Or maybe what did you do before you took on this role? Like, what if the reason for you working so hard was taken away? You didn't have the reason to do that anymore, but of course you're still in the system. What would you rather do? And you let them kind of dream a little bit. Sometimes they don't want to. They're like, it's just not possible. I can't do it. So you say, okay, again, can we experiment? Can I give you evidence that this might be possible? And you don't have to feel hopeful and dream until you gain that evidence. Like, can I go to this exile and you can see what happens, just for 90 seconds or 5 minutes or whatever they'll allow. So those are the top 5 protector concerns. And in the next video, I'll go over the next 5, 6 through 10. And if you have any additional questions about these concerns and how to meet them, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Or maybe you have stories about your own parts or clients' parts who have had these concerns and kind of what happened for you. I would love to know about it.